Here we go. The 2024 WNBA Finals are underway.
Yo, what's good, everybody, man? I'm already hyped up, man, for tomorrow's game. I'm here. Welcome, first of all, welcome to another episode of the MLP podcast. And here with me today, I got a special guest. I got the great John Felton. Josh, how you doing, man? Thanks for being here.
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Man, I appreciate it, man. I just found out about your channel a couple of maybe a week ago, and it's been great, man. Breaking down film and everything. So we're gonna be talking about the art of breaking down film. We're gonna be talking about Game 4 and Game 5. So don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. So we're gonna be talking about let's get into the art of breaking down film. Obviously, that's mainly what you do on your channel, right?
Yes.
So if you haven't checked his YouTube channel, is Josh Felton, the same way, WNBA videos and obviously NBA videos, and breaking down film. That's very important. We're going to be diving right into that. So what do you think are the most important steps when it comes to breaking down film?
That's a good question. I would say ultimately it starts with having a attention to detail. I think attention to detail is probably the biggest thing. And what I always tell people is rarely when I watch games live is my emphasis on the entertainment aspect. I'm mainly looking at the offensive approach, the defensive approach, maybe substitution patterns. But the game happens so fast that even for me, it can be hard to pick up on in real time. So when I do film breakdowns, I always emphasize watching the game back a second time if you can, even a third time if possible. I think there's so many things that you pick up on the second, third time you watch a game that you don't see the first time. And when it comes to making videos and when it comes to being detailed, it's when you watch it a second and third time that you start to pick up on tendencies, not only from players, but from teams, like schemes and things of that nature. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing, is having a desire to watch it multiple times, watch it sequence multiple times, just to pick up on certain things.
Definitely, and obviously you need to have the knowledge, or maybe a little bit of knowledge about basketball when you're doing that, because we're gonna be talking about that later, about the culture of highlights, the way that people consume basketball. They're not going to be, like you mentioned, they're not going to be breaking down, the film or watching the game once, twice or three times. So, we're going to be talking about that. But it was very important that you mentioned the fact that having attention to detail, that sounded like, Kobe Bryant to me, trying to perfect your craft and trying to pay attention to different things. And you obviously explained it very well. What are for you the most important aspects about it?
I would say probably the most important aspects are, I like to really look at play calls, and sort of knowing that each team has a different personnel leads to different sort of offensive process. So if we stick with the WNBA for a second, I know that Connecticut, for example, their offense is going to look a lot different than Minnesota's offense because of the personnel. They're running offense through, say, Alyssa Thomas. Alyssa Thomas is not a shooter, but how do you get her more involved offensively? How do you get the team involved offensively? So what you'll notice is Connecticut loves to run inverted actions where a guard screens for Alyssa Thomas to get downhill, which is sort of a modern principle because we're used to bigs setting screens for guards. They sort of do it the reverse. But what is the intent behind why they're doing that, right? It's to get her going downhill. So when you see that, you understand that certain play calls and certain approaches vary depending on the team and depending on roster construction, things of that nature. I would say it starts there. And then defensively, I think defensively, honestly, I might have more fun studying defensive schemes because I think I think you notice those adjustments. Maybe I notice those adjustments a little bit more. Maybe the casual fan, it might be a little different, but screening especially is so important. How teams defend the pick and roll. The pick and roll is basically a staple of modern offense now. There's so many different ways to defend it, but it's also play that offenses have gotten so skilled at running it that it almost feels in some ways like you're always giving up something. And so
Yeah,
the fascinating part about it is how are teams willing to guard pick and roll? What are teams willing to give up? And that says a lot about a coach, their philosophy, and ultimately roster construction, team strategy, and things of that nature. So I would say all of those collections are
definitely. It was a great response. And you know, when you mentioned the Connecticut Sun, the one of the first thing when you was talking about the offense, the DHOs, you know,
yeah,
with Alyssa Thomas, she can. I That's one thing. Obviously, this is random, but I really appreciate, or I'm starting to appreciate a little bit more lately. I mean, in a few years, the fact that players can set proper screens. But you know, the casual fan is not gonna be talking about goddamn setting screens and everything. You know, they wanna watch buckets. You know, they wanna watch offense threes. They wanna watch players shooting threes. But you know, Alyssa Thomas, she's a great screener,
yeah,
and you know, she with the DHOs and everything. And I really like the fact that you mentioned the explaining why something happened, or you know, the fact that I think it was in game. I don't remember if it was game 2 or 3. The fact that the Liberty got a lot of offensive rebounds,
yes,
like 20, right? I mean, something
yeah,
like that, like 20, and you perfectly explain it. And I was gonna give you a shout out, but I couldn't. You know, I was getting ready for I was doing the prep, and I was watching your video, and I said, damn, I'm gonna I my bad, in order, because I didn't shout you out, but you know, you said that Minnesota was switching a lot on defense. So the
yeah,
fact that you are switching on defense a lot. I mean, I think they switch it more on defense, more than they did in the regular season. I
yeah.
think I was listening, you know. And this is another question. Besides this, I think this is a good question. Besides, obviously, going back to the film, which are you like go-to podcast when it comes to talking, when it comes to NBA, or let's stick to WNBA? Do you got a go-to podcast when it comes to talking about the game?
I know the Athletic. They have
Oh,
a women's basketball podcast. I believe with Sabrina Merchant on there, and I'm trying to remember the other two co-hosts, but they're a really good podcast that I listen to. They come out with a couple episodes a week, and you know they're breaking down the game, they're breaking down awards and other teams as well, and I think they do a great job of coverage over there. And I would say in general, obviously Thinking Basketball's podcast is great. If you guys haven't heard, definitely check them out. And then other YouTube channels like my guy Hoop Venue.
oh yeah, yeah. Who
He has
venue?
YouTube.
Yeah,
He has
yeah.
a YouTube channel. He covers the NBA and he does a lot of similar approaches. So I would say those are a lot of the content I listen to on a daily.
Have you heard about the Dunker Spot?
I have, yes, with
What?
Nikias and Steve Jones. Yes, they're
Yeah,
great.
they
They are
are, you
phenomenal.
know, I mean, I mean this in a you know, in a positive way. They are on the other side of the spectrum. You know, they are very, you know, technical, and you know, but that's their way. You know, that's the positive thing about them, that you got a deep dive, you know, analysis about the game, and they go by offense and different, and they put the same emphasis when it comes to, you know, talking about the Chicago Sky, or the Dallas Wing, as they do with the Liberty and the Minnesota Lynx.
Absolutely.
They are great. So thanks for sharing that, man. Let's go into the objectivity about breaking down film. What do you think about the objectivity about it?
I think it's so important. And what I sort of think is, I won't say is unique about me, but when I sort of started watching basketball, um, my dad was a Wizards fan, Washington Wizards, basically all DC sports. But for the most part, those teams were kind of struggling for most of my childhood and young adult life. They haven't been great. And so when I really started to fall in love with basketball, it wasn't at a time where like I was just a fan of a certain team, where I sort of looked at the leagues through the lens of red, white, and blue, if you will. And so because of that, I was always watching every team in the league. Like I was every team in the league, what's going on in the Western Conference, Eastern Conference, whatever. And I sort of had that same outlook with the WNBA. I never really had even though I supported the hometown, Mystics and hope they do well. There was never like
with Aaliyah Edwards.
Yeah, there was never really a need, or I felt a desire for me to just look at the game or look at
through a fan's lens.
Basketball through a fan's lens. I never really had that desire to do it. And even something like your typical lunchroom debates where guys are debating LeBron versus Jordan, and like those were debates that I would listen to like as a fly on the wall, but they were never something that I was someone I would get heated in conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Never something I was really passionate about. So I think for me, I was always around people that emphasize having an open mind about basketball. It's okay to have differentiating opinions, but as long as you can articulate it well and it is reasonable and comes to a strong conclusion that obviously is rooted in watching film first, you can accept that. And so that's always something I emphasize. I understand that, especially in the landscape of basketball today, no one's going to agree on everything. And in fact, if we agreed on everything, I don't think basketball would be very fun, to be honest with you. I think
that's a great point.
I think that's the beauty of having so many, different opinions that you can articulate it well. And, it also leads to, more substantive discourse, I think.
Definitely. And the fact that you said that, not having, not your opinion, but the things that you talk about, base them on the fact that you watch film, we can, when you start going through it and getting into the process, it's like very easily you can see someone that just talks,
Yeah.
And they talk and and we can get into that as well. It's like the fan. I don't like when people say the timeout, the coach, she didn't take a timeout, and I understand the useness of a timeout. It's like you can give your players some rest. You're gonna give them some coaching and everything, but how can someone use that like an excuse? That it's part of the game, right?
Yeah, I think timeouts and stuff like that is a great example of when teams lose. I think a lot of fans like to focus on, okay, well, let's explain why they lose. Well, if they had called a timeout there, or if they hadn't called a timeout there, then maybe.
The what ifs.
But the truth is, if a team wins and they don't call a timeout, nobody's talking about how that ends, right? And if your opinion is dictated on whether a team wins in the final 5 seconds or they lose in the final 5 seconds, then I think you need to look at the game and look at the outcome of the game through a broader lens. I do think there is room for criticism of coaches, but I think a lot of it is based on the outcome of the final 10, 15 seconds of a game, where their intention or their approach is something that they've done all season, or they're doing something that the team is ultimately comfortable with. And if a shot doesn't go in, a lot of people's opinion changes. So I think it's about, changing sort of that perspective of the game.
Definitely, when you got people or fans, I gotta correct myself. You got fans of teams. I'm an Indiana Fever fan because I was watching Caitlin Clark before she got into the WNBA. But you got people calling, asking or calling for coaches to be fired. As you said, they go on these rants about timeouts and this coach is trash and everything. But this is the other thing I almost forgot. It's like, when the team wins, it's the players, they got it done, the players and everything. She or he made the shot and everything. But when they lose, it's the coach.
Yeah.
But we gotta give the same energy. If we're gonna give all the praise, I try to do that. If we're gonna give all the praise to the players, you gotta give them most of the blame when they lose. But they bring the coaches and everything. But that's another topic for another day. You already talk about this, but how many times you watch on average a game in order to do a breakdown?
Yeah, I would say So I would say it changes from the regular season to the playoffs because with the playoffs, I'm typically focusing on a specific series. So I'll watch, a game in a series multiple times. For example, doing a finals recap, I watched game one probably 4 times. I watched it live
Damn.
and then I watched it back a couple times that same night. And then the next morning I watched it again.
Do
And
you got some tricks? I'm
oh
sorry
my
to interrupt. Do
goodness,
you got
yeah.
some tricks? Like, for example, I skipped the free throws.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. With league pass, things are condensed. I definitely skip free throws if I know, they're,
Because in the NBA they got like all possessions.
yeah, all
That's
possession.
that's that's the greatest invent in human history.
Yes.
All
And
possessions.
there's another site that I use to sort of it also clips together, every possession, the hilo.io. It's a
Oh,
site
I've never
that
heard of it.
yeah, it's a site that has every NBA and WNBA game going back to 2015 and
Damn.
splices up every possession of every game. So if you want to say I want to watch random game for November, the Kings are playing the Grizzlies, you can watch it. And what you'll notice about those is sometimes the sequencing is a little bit off, which is why I say it's not entirely perfect to rely on spliced footage because
Mm.
some things I'll notice is they might show the 8 seconds prior to a possession leading to a score. But if I don't know the 15 seconds, I might not see how the play broke down entirely. I might
Yeah.
not, there might be things that I miss out on, which is another thing we'll probably get into with like highlight culture because those type of things are synonymous where you miss out on certain aspects of the game by watching certain, condensed footage. Although I would say that when it comes to watching the game, I do think the hilo.io, that I think that's the name of the site. I think that's a great site for like finding the condensed footage in a way that it captures most of it. But I would say it's not perfect, but it captures a good amount of what I'm looking for if I want to watch it for a third or fourth time.
Do you watch it without sound?
After I watch it live, I typically watch it without sound.
Yeah. That's some not tricks, but that's some features. Some
Yeah.
features, when it comes to do the same thing.
I wasn't sure if that was I wasn't sure that was just me that did that. I was like, maybe I'm
I like when I'm watching before I watch the game live. Yeah, I like watching, I mean, listening to some podcasts and everything or something, and I'm watching the game. Let's get into the highlight culture, when it comes to NBA, WNBA. What do you think about that in general?
I think it is a slippery slope because I feel like it's great for getting fans into the game. Fans, they come
Engagement,
in,
right?
yeah, they want to engage and they want to see the highlights. But ultimately, when you bring in an influx of fans, you also bring in people that want to be a part of the discourse, but they haven't seen enough, but they think they've seen enough because the highlights is enough in their opinion. And so I think the biggest difference with me is it's funny because for the finals, I went back and I watched the highlights. I watched the highlights for basically every game in the series. I want to see what are the big highlights that the WNBA
They put out.
is putting out for the
Wow.
casual fan to watch. And what you notice is there's almost no defensive highlights whatsoever. That's the biggest thing that pops out to me. If anyone were to watch those games, they would have no idea how great Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart have been on defense in the series. It's been one of the best defensive performances from two players I've ever seen. But you wouldn't see that watching highlights. And I think that's so interesting about it. Also, they leave out like final sequences of like the fourth quarter. But ultimately, if you're following the game throughout the course of the entire season, you'll miss key substitution patterns. And this is actually something I brought up after game one is Cheryl Reeve made probably one of the gutsiest decisions I've ever seen from a coach.
Going small?
Yes, she went
four
super
guards.
small. 4 guards and Collier at the center, which we've seen some of that during the season. But when you consider how much they were getting dominated inside because of how small they already were, it just made that decision.
She's like poking the bear, right? It's
exactly.
like you're getting success switching on us, because we are a small team. We're gonna go smaller to see what you can do. How can you adjust to that thing?
Exactly. But the thing about the highlight culture is if you watch the final 3 or 4 minutes of game 1, there are basically no defensive highlights. You don't know how the Lynx performed on defense during that stretch. We know they went on a 11-2 or 12-2 run, whatever it was, but you don't know how Collier looked in those minutes. If somebody were to see Collier in 3-4 minutes guarding Jonquel Jones, switching on to Sabrina Ionescu, switching on to Brianna Stewart, and absolutely shutting down anything the Liberty wanted, I think it would give a different perspective to how she played in that game. Obviously, she played great on offense, but it would further the appreciation people have. But ultimately, I think it would lead to a greater appreciation for defensive players in general. I think and maybe this is something with the NBA as well, there are some players on defense that kind of get a bad rep. Rudy Gobert is one I'm thinking of. But ultimately, when highlights are sort of put out there of, oh, look at this player misses a dunk or this person, they just make
Airballs
layups,
a layup. I mean, or a
airball
dunk.
layups. Those are the things people remember. Those are the things people remember. So when it comes to, and even on defense, all we remember about Rudy is Luka Doncic scored a game winner on him in the playoffs. That's
They
the
are
only highlight.
persuading your opinion, definitely,
That's
with
what
the
they
way
do.
that with the product that they are putting out.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's deep. That's deep. This is knowledge, man. This is knowledge, man. We appreciate you being here, man. Yeah. Let's get into what else. Oh, scouting report. Obviously, as we were talking before we went live. You're very obviously more than capable of doing a scouting report. And how do you pick tendencies? Or it's like, by watching more games, you become more, fluent when it comes,
Yeah.
on picking up tendencies, or patterns. The way that I was watching, it wasn't a drill, but the fact that it was like 3 minutes, Lynx players, they were like moving in sync on defense, like showing and recovering, then going back to the 3 point line. It was crazy. And that's one of the things these two teams, I think it's not an exaggeration to say that they are one of the best teams when it comes to defensive rotations.
Mm-hmm. And I would agree with that. And I think for me, definitely looking at tendencies. I would say it takes for me, I would say 7 to 8 games before I start really picking up on tendencies about a player. So when I do film breakdowns on a specific player, which I did like in the regular season, I would watch games and I'd be like, okay, let's see where they like to operate on offense, like where they like to go to on the floor, and what moves they like to go to initially. And then you look at when that first move is taken away, what do they like to go to? And ultimately, what you'll find is a lot of players have a rhythm, a timing, and a feel to what they do, which is common. And then I think what you'll also notice is the weaknesses will start to pick up when star players, especially, they play so well that ultimately I think their weaknesses sort of get magnified when you really put it under a microscope. You start to notice, okay, maybe they did that a little different than what I'm used to seeing, or especially with passing. I think passing is the biggest thing to notice, because rarely are there ever players that are just outright bad passers, like they just miss a read. But I think what you'll notice is when you watch certain players, maybe it takes them a half second later to recognize a read. And
Yeah.
that is the difference between that pass even being made and the pass not being made. And
Speed
that
of a
is,
second.
that is something that I really picked up on, is rarely is it going to be something that's just an outright, oh my goodness, this person can't dribble with their left hand. It's not going to be that obvious. It's going to be more subtle things. And I think it comes with watching clips over and over. Sometimes I'll watch something and I'll be like, hold on, let me watch that again. And I'll rewind it back, just that same clip, watch it 6 or 7 times, and I'll start to pick up on something. And even if it's not a trend, I'll write it down like, okay, this player did this, it's a little different. Keep an eye on that next time they make a drive going to their right hand or something like that. I think those are ultimately the approaches I look at when it comes to player tendencies. And then team tendencies, you sort of look at play calls, what they like to run in certain situations, and their effectiveness when teams guard it a certain way.
Definitely. When I was doing some prep for this show like a couple of days ago, I got into a website, and they showed you a clip of like a 6 second clip, and you got to pick up, you know, some mistakes, you know, and as you mentioned, you gotta go back, go back and watch, you know, and they were mentioning some mistakes like not ball pressure, you know, over the opposing player with the ball, you know, not, I don't know, you know, not having a low man on the paint and all those things. But as you say, you gotta go back and watch and watch and watch and keep going. It's like doing exercise. You gotta keep on the you gotta get on the treadmill. It's gonna be tough at the beginning, and then you gotta keep going, and you're gonna obviously succeed. Um, how do you balance the fact that, you know, as you mentioned, doing breakdowns of maybe household names but versus not household, you know, players that are not maybe very, you know, known to the public?
Yeah. I think for me, it really comes down to watching the team. Usually in a season, I really don't have a agenda of like certain players I want to make a video on. It's sort of just like I've noticed this player has been playing very well, or I've noticed this player is so crucial to what a team does. And it's like I really want to focus on that because they might not be the headliner in the news the next day, or they might not be the headliner for most videos. But if I think they're the one of the biggest drivers of impact, I think it's something worth highlighting. So I think for me, you know, I did a video on the two Mystics rookies, Aaliyah Edwards and Julie Van Loo, earlier in the year. And, you know, I've been covering the Mystics specifically for the last couple of years. And, you know, I've noticed that, you know, early in the year, they were running a lot of pick and roll with those two. And I thought their synergy and timing was ahead of what most rookies have. Like they have a connection and a feel that I thought was ahead of what you see from most rookies in the WNBA. And so for me, it was about, okay, I want to highlight this because at the time I think they were 1-12. Like they're not a team
Oh
people are
yeah, yeah,
talking about. But I think what they're doing is more so the process that I am admiring, that I'm a fan of. I think is worth highlighting rather than the outcome of wins and losses. And so when I focus on the players, it's then that I'll notice certain tendencies. So like I'll look at the stats ahead of time, but when I'm watching players, I'll be like, okay, I notice Van Loo maybe doesn't get to the free throw line that much. Why is that? And so when I look at on offense, I notice, okay, she doesn't attack this area of the floor or whatever, and that could be a weakness, or she's great at shooting, and the way she bends defenses, even if it doesn't lead to an assist, is worth highlighting. Those type of things that ultimately end up going deeper than the box score when you're looking at it. I think all of those things are sort of what I enjoy most about covering players that maybe aren't the headliners, but are big drivers of impact still.
definitely. And that was a great point as well, when you said that there are a lot of things that don't go into the stat sheet, you know, and we get stuck in the highlights and the box score, you know. But and as you were saying, and for the people, for the casual fan, you know, oh, why I'm gonna be watching the Mystics? They are losing, you know, almost every game. But there's always something that you can pick up and you can use if you're trying to get better at understanding the game, right?
Yes.
You can learn from not a pickup game, you know. I'm exaggerating, but you can with the Pistons. You can watch the Pistons. You can get some player tendencies, as you said, some team tendencies, even if the product is not as good, you know.
And ultimately watching other teams, maybe teams that are struggling, it'll give you more appreciation for the context.
Definitely.
Like for example, I did a video on Arike earlier in the year, around the Olympic break. And, you know, there was a lot of conversation about whether she should have made the Olympic team. And ultimately, the discourse around Arike, it's either look at how many points she averages, or on the other side, it's, well, she's not very efficient, right? And
She
so,
played defense.
right,
She's
right,
a shot jogger.
exactly. And so, for me, when I'm watching, it's like, okay, where is the truth? I think a lot of people
Mm,
feel like it's either one or the other, right? And so when I watch her game, I watch her tendencies, and those are things I kind of already knew her tendencies just from watching for so many years. But you start to understand situations can heavily, and I mean heavily, impact a player's stats, right? Her being below, league average in efficiency, a lot of that has to do with her not having, a complimentary score out there, or her playing in a situation where she doesn't have great shooting around her. And when I watch defenses sort of ignore her teammates just to guard her, that is sort of the context that's missing when you just say 27 points per game and this is her true shooting or whatever it is. Those type of that type of context is missing when people just quote the box score plainly. But at the same time, you want to understand tendencies at the same time. Can a player's game translate to a better situation based on the tendencies they've shown in their current situation or based on the tendencies they've shown throughout their career? Those are things that you can gauge with watching film, merging film study with what I call, what I think is analytics. So
definitely. So let me ask you about how did you find it was easier, it was difficult to find your niche when it comes to talking about the game? Because we got betting podcasts, we got obviously people doing podcasts and talking sometimes out of the asses, reactions, they're reacting to the highlights. We got comedy as well when they are like imitating Angel Reese, missing layups and shit. How it was easy, difficult for you to find your niche when it comes to creating a channel and being a content creator?
I think for me, the first thing I really did when I decided I wanted to get into YouTube and content creation was I said, okay, what are the channels that I watch the most? And why is it that I watch those channels?
That you go back.
Right. Why do I go back to those channels? So I wrote down a list of things. Maybe it's the first thing I see is, a captivating thumbnail or captivating title. But okay, that's going to get me to click, but is that going to get me to stay? So now I look at what gets me to stay. What about their content gets me to stay? And for me, being a fan of film and X's and O's, getting more in depth about the game. I don't want to talk about, is this player better than this player all day, every day? I know where I can go to find that type of content. It's not hard to find. But if I want to see X's and O's, what about the way they break down the game is so captivating to me? The fact that they use several clips from several games and not just focusing on one game that could be, a bad shooting slump or a good shooting stretch or whatever. They focus on the overall tendencies of a player, tendencies of a team. Those are things that they take a lot of time. Like I can tell the time was spent to create that video and to study those players. And so when I sort of had that approach, I knew that if I curate a channel and I curate my content to be that type of way, the people that I want to have this type of discourse with, this conversation about basketball, they're going to find my channel eventually. It might be slow, it might take a while, but eventually they're going to make their way over here and they're going to stay. And the people that just want to talk about, is this player better than this person, they won't really be interested in my channel because that's not what we do. And so I'm not going to say it'll weed it out, but it'll focus the type of audience that I want to have on my channel to that channel. And I think ultimately it took a little bit of time just being consistent with videos, but I think so far it's been great.
Definitely. And let me ask you with this, let me ask you about this as well. How do you deal with copyright?
Yeah. Thankfully copyright has been pretty generous when I like appeal videos. It's really tough to get by on the first try and everything like that. But I usually appeal all my videos and they get approved pretty quickly. So rarely have I had a video just like get copyrighted and stay that way for forever. I think I've only had like one video I had that
I haven't appealed. Sometimes I get the copyright strike. I mean, not the strike, but the little notification and everything, and I put an image over it, or But
I would appeal all of them because you'll basically, especially if you're doing what I'm doing, and it's like you're you have a voiceover the content, you're highlighting certain videos. You're not just replaying the entire highlight or whatever.
And it's without sound.
Right. And if it's without sound, that means it's under fair use. And you're modifying the content in a way that it's not under copyright restrictions. So I would appeal basically
Wow.
all of them, and you'll win pretty easily.
Wow, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate it. And you mentioned I really like the part that you said I'm gonna create my channel, I'm gonna do my videos, and the fact that you are great at what you do, people's gonna go your way, they're gonna find your channel. And the one thing that came to my mind, the fact that people use clickbait, or as you were saying, this player is better and this and that, this is the worst player, that's entertainment. And I really sometimes I engage into it, or when I go live and everything. But to me, that's entertainment. One thing, as you said, are the X's and O, the film and everything. And the other part, as you said, you can go on other channels.
Yeah,
And the fact that you want to create a certain community around your videos and your channel as well.
absolutely,
That's
absolutely.
what else? What else? I think. Oh, let me ask you this before we get into game 4, because I think I'm gonna need to change the title to "The Art of Breaking Down Film" with with Josh. And do you think breaking down film or film study, or whatever, is the biggest form or for showing love for the game, or being the ultimate student of the game?
I would say that is the aspect of basketball that I think unifies um all parties, if you will. I think everyone sort of has their opinion on stats and the use of like analytics or whatever. But I think one thing that can't be taken away is like if you have a good eye for the game of basketball, like that stands out when you incorporate your film into it. So there are a lot of people that have come across my videos that might disagree with the stats that I use or something like that, but they acknowledge that, there's a clear he understands what he's watching. Like it's not there's not any type of confusion about what I'm looking at or like I don't understand. There's always that okay, his analysis is rooted in watching the game. And I think the most important part about that is I don't let even though I use analytics, I don't let that dictate what my conclusion is. There are times where a stat might say something, but what I'm watching on film disagrees with how impactful the stat might say the player is. And so I'll disagree. And I tell people all the time, it is okay if what you see with your eyes disagree with what numbers say. The thing that what you should be doing when that happens isn't saying, "Oh, I'm just going to ignore." It should be why. Why is the stat saying this player? Maybe this, I think the best example of this, I think, is Derek White. Derek White is a player that a lot of people view maybe as a role player. Advanced stats view him as a borderline all-star, like every year, all-star, maybe even all NBA. And so a lot of times people say, why is it that these stats view Derek White so much better than I think he is? And sometimes when you go back under the hood and you watch the game again, what you'll realize is, okay, maybe this stat is showing that he is involved in more pick and roll than I thought he was. He's more than just a spot up shooter. He's one of the best perimeter defenders, if not the best perimeter defender in the game right now. And the way he is used, not only in Boston, but what he has showcased is translatable to so many different schemes, so many different situations throughout the
Like
league.
portability.
Exactly. Portability, those type of aspects, those stand out. Those are things that analytics might capture that you might not see under the surface of your eye and things like that. So I
With
think
Jokic as well, right?
absolutely. Jokic is a player that, I mean, he has been able to fit with so many different, like he doesn't need the ball in his hands to be effective. Like he doesn't need too many touches. He doesn't need to monopolize the ball so much. And he's very quick with his actions. He gets the ball and he knows what he's going to do with it. And he's a fantastic passer as well.
He gets a lot of touches, but the ball doesn't stick in his hands.
Exactly.
And he's a great player. I'm wearing my Jokic cap with the 2 MVPs. I need to add a third one to the hat. Let's get into Oh, and I think you already answered this. Like, how fan are you, or at how much of a fan are you of advanced stats?
I
And
do like,
win shares per 38, defensive win shares, PER
yeah.
and everything.
So
Raptor. I don't
yeah,
know who the hell came up with that. The LeBron, advanced stats. I don't know.
yeah. So it's interesting to me because there are some advanced stats that I use and I think are pretty good in large samples, and then there are some that I'm a lot more skeptical of just because of what they capture specifically. So like I'll start with the W because the WNBA is in a unique situation where just they recently started playing 40 games in a season like 2 years ago. And then before that they weren't anywhere close to 40. So a 40 game sample is not enough to come to a strong conclusion based off of advanced stats, right?
Mm.
Caitlin Clark, I think, is a great example of this because
Yeah, she was very low.
her advanced stats, even at the end of this year, they're close. They have her closer to like a top 30, top 35 player than to a top 10 player. And you see that, and you say, "How in the world is?" And what it is a bad stretch can also significantly hurt your advanced numbers in a 40 game stretch, right? That first 10 games where the Fever were
2 and
playing,
8, two and
yeah,
nine.
every team in the league and their offense was terrible. And they were, and on top of it, they were getting blown out in those games. And Caitlin was playing a lot of minutes. So even when they start to go on a fantastic stretch in July and August, it is hard to overcome those plus minus numbers when you're losing by 30 in the first month of the season, right? And so that is something that's important to know with advanced stats is a 40 game sample is typically not enough to come to a strong conclusion or when those stats start to stabilize. I don't remember the exact number of minutes, but I believe for like plus minus based numbers, it takes like 1,500 to 1,800 minutes of a player that's on the court and off the court for those metrics to start to stabilize. And
Wow.
in the WNBA, most star players, I don't think they play more than 500 minutes on the bench. I don't think there's anywhere close to 500 minutes on the bench. And then in the playoffs, someone like Asia Wilson, I was actually looking at this a few weeks ago, looking at her sort of on-off numbers during the postseason. And over the last 3 years, I don't know if she's played a total of like 100 minutes on the bench in the last three postseasons. Like 100 minutes is not anywhere close to being able to come up with a conclusion about how a player is or how
Oh,
the team looks without that player.
because some people say, oh, look at the plus minus when she goes to the bench, they are quote unquote better without
Yeah,
her, and they got a huge they can sustain the fact that she goes to the bench, and
exactly.
and they talk
And
about different things.
and so the thing is, I think on-off data is so important, especially in the NBA. I think it's so helpful, even in the course of a single season. But the amount of minutes that a player plays in the NBA in one season is equal to like 4 seasons of WNBA basketball. Like that really puts into perspective like how noisy advanced stats can be in the WNBA. However, um I think there is value in looking at advanced stats over the course of several seasons,
Mm.
multiple seasons, going back 3 or 4 years, because that way you can somewhat understand if what you're seeing is fluky or it's a trend. And I think that's the biggest thing is I'm more so when I look at advanced numbers in the W, I'm more so looking at trends. I'm looking at is the data saying something consistently about this player every season? If it's saying something different from year to year, maybe that has to do with a hot stretch or a stretch where a player is just struggling in 10 games, or a player is changing situations that might impact how these numbers are looking at this player. I think ultimately that is the big thing I look at. But I think when it comes to the box score and like tracking data, I think those are the two biggest things in the W that I emphasize because I think there is a big disconnect between the I would say the traditional box score crowd and the advanced box score crowd. Um, and I think a great example of this is um, we'll say efficiency. I think assists is another one, and I think defense. Right. When it came to defensive player of the year, it really came down to Asia Wilson and Nafisa Collier, and right the overwhelming narrative as it came close to award selecting awards was that okay, well the Lynx are a better defensive team, but Asia has better defensive stats. Right, that was sort of what people were coming
leading the league in blocks and
leading the league in blocks, rebounds, which I've never knew rebounds was part of someone's argument for defense, but steals was another one, and I think defensive win shares, and those stats miss a lot of context, right? One, those stats aren't specific to a player's role. If somebody is a shot blocker, which Asia Wilson is a shot blocker, she is going to rank higher in blocks and stats that typically track rim protection. However, we know Nafisa Collier's role is more so, I would say, like a Swiss Army knife type of guarding pick and roll, being the small ball defender that she is. She's not somebody that is accumulating nearly as many blocks. But if you go under the hood and you look at tracking data, you look at their effectiveness guarding pick and roll this season, their effectiveness guarding in isolation this season, their effectiveness guarding in specific schemes, you will start to the bigger takeaway will be Asia Wilson doesn't necessarily have better individual stats on defense. It may just be she just leads in blocks and steals and other traditional counting stats. So I think that's more so the emphasis that I make with the data I look at is, okay, looking at traditional stats might be helpful, but there are other stats that better capture the impact people are looking for that blocks and steals don't account for, if that makes sense.
Definitely, man. That was a huge conversation, and we got Becky. She was saying, the voters have to get into third level stats in order to, vote for Nafisa Collier, and then they were wearing Asia Wilson's jersey because the league sabotaged Asia Wilson, but it is what it is. Let me ask you this about the refs. During this year more noticeably, maybe due to the exposure that the league has seen during during this season, the continue of pointing out, blaming, calling out, whatever you want to call it, when it comes to a player and coaches to the refs. The aces complaining about the refs. Cheryl Reeve was talking about post game 3. Then we got Sandy Brondello, saying that she wants the game to be fair. That when we touch them, it's a bloody call. And we get it on offense and we don't get calls. What do you think about players, coaches calling out the referees, and what do you think about the referees in general?
I think
and their job is a tough job, right?
Yeah, I think referee play has been so. It's always going to be magnified in big playoff moments. Like I think, the biggest takeaway will be free throw discrepancy. Like teams like, well, how come we don't get the same number of free throws as this team? And I think a lot of times that will be the big takeaway from games, where I think the complaining is somewhat warranted, because I have watched games and I'm like, okay, I don't know what the refs are looking at here. I don't know why they call it. Now a team has to use their challenge to reverse a bad call. I've seen that way too many times in the playoffs this year. But I think ultimately the sort of constant going to the press conference about officiating has led to that sort of being the takeaway for a lot of games, especially in this series particularly. First it was Cheryl Reeve sort of going to the refs, and then it was Sandy Brondello. And I'm not going to say that their criticisms aren't warranted or aren't valid, but what has ended up happening is now a lot of people are sort of explaining away the refs being the reason why a team might have won. And it's easier to make that claim for fans when the margin of victory is 2 points. Like every game in the series is
a close loss,
super close. It's easy to focus on the ref being the reason why we lost this game and we won the next one and whatever. I think it is going to be. I just really hope that Game 5 tomorrow is not a game where our takeaway is, man, the ref made this terrible call and the ref did this and this. I really hope that's not the case. But I mean, both teams have now gone and complained about officiating in the last 24 hours. So it'll be interesting to see what Game 5 looks like from a officiating standpoint.
Definitely Game 5 tomorrow, 9 p.m. my time. I think you are 2 hours behind, so it's gonna be 8 p.m. your 6,
Yeah.
like 7
Yeah,
7 p.m. 7 p.m. your time. Game 5, Liberty and the Minnesota. I mean, the Minnesota Lynx going against the New York Liberty. The Liberty have lost 5, their first 5 finals. I got the Liberty in 5. Do you like doing predictions?
I had predicted Minnesota in 4 before the series started.
Wow, in 4.
So I thought it was going to be an insane. But you know what's crazy? I actually tweeted this out. I said before the series started, I thought this is going to be one of the best WNBA playoff series we've ever seen. Like, I remember I said it's going to be up there with, Vegas, Seattle from a couple years ago, and the finals in 2016, those years. I thought this was going to challenge those postseasons. And I had a couple of people be like, "Oh no, I don't think it'll be that." I think it has absolutely lived up to the hype. I thought it was going to be a 4-game series, but I thought every game was going to be close. I'm glad we get a 5-game. I'm glad we've gotten the series is going to max. I think I'm going to still roll with Minnesota, though. I think Minnesota is going to figure out a way to get it done on the road.
Wow. Damn, it's going to be another heartbroken situation for Liberty fans.
That would be, I know it'll
damn.
be.
I don't even want to think about the possibility of them losing in back-to-back years, the finals on their home court, losing the first 6 finals in their franchise history. Damn. But I gotta go with the Liberty, man. The one thing that I was paying attention, what I was saying before the series, it was something very, very simple. The fact that you got scorers or players that can score, and there are like I said, like how can I say, like top 20 players on the league in the 3 main positions on the court, with Sabrina, with at guard, with Stewie, at forward, and Jonquel Jones. That's one thing that I needed to ask you. Thank God I remember. What do you make about people, because I've heard this throughout the season? Oh, they need to get more touches to JJ. Oh, they need to get JJ more involved, and they go in these rants. What do you make about that? What comes to your mind first when someone says that they need to get JJ the ball? Because that sounds very easy, right? I mean, that's something very, very simple, right?
I think with how often Minnesota is switching, I am a little bit surprised that JJ hasn't gotten as many touches as I thought. I think she's still gotten a decent amount. I think in Game 5 with Elena Smith, I mean, I think she was still laboring with her back in Game 4. I think that should be something that they really look to go at, because I know Game 1, they started the game, we're just going to give Jonquel Jones the ball, and there was nothing Minnesota could do about it at all. And I think it's not that they have to run their offense through Jones, but I think when possessions start to falter, or you go through a stretch where Sabrina and Stewie aren't making shots, having someone that can punish a mismatch down low in Jonquel Jones, I think that should be more of an option that the team goes towards when they go through a stretch where they're not making shots. Or let's say they go 3 or 4 possessions without a made basket, throw it inside to her off a switch. And Minnesota, recently they've been trying to guard it straight up, or they've been trying to avoid sending help, which leads to them getting in rotation. So I think in a situation where Minnesota's not showing help, you just throw the ball and hope she can make a play on a smaller defender. But I do think that defensively, New York has been Sabrina Ionescu also deserves a lot of credit, because I think the last 3 games have been the best defensive game she's played in her entire life. I think the last 3 games has been game 2 was the best defensive game of her life, and game 3 was even better. Game 4 looked like it was even better than that. Her effort on the defensive end has been, I mean, she deserves a lot of credit. Even with the shots not falling, I think she's been a big contributor on the defensive end.
Should she have been a first all WNBA player?
I had her on my first team. Yeah, I would
With
say.
So you're taking out AT?
Yeah, I had AT on second team. Yeah.
And your second team is the same like that it was with the WNBA? Like,
actually, no. Actually, I don't want to.
Who you got?
It's tough because I don't want to spoil. I'm making a top 10
damn, my
video at the end
bad,
of the
bro.
season. No, you're good. I'm making a top 10
my bad, bro.
at the end of the season. So I would say my second team is quite a bit different than the one that came out.
Oh yeah.
Spoiler
we gotta reserve the for the video. Yeah, with but I and she was saying that was a great second all WNBA performance. And let me ask you this: do you think that one, because I think JJ made like 4 out of 5 threes yesterday, and the first when Sandy was post game, she was talking about the referees and everything. One of the things that came to my mind, it was like maybe they are not giving JJ more the ball on the paint because maybe she's gonna get hacked, and they're not gonna call a lot of contact in the post, in the paint, But what do you think about?
They did miss quite a few calls on her in the first 2 games in New York, like a lot, to the point where I was surprised that New York didn't go to the refs after the first 2 games and say something, or go to the press conference and say something, because there were a couple of plays where they were Minnesota was basically wrapping their arms around JJ, like basically trying to foul her. And I think because, again, I think it's also tough because she is so much bigger than anyone out there that
when maybe goes into disadvantage for her.
Yes, I think that goes into it. She might be so physically overpowering that even her initiating contact in a legal way looks like an offensive foul. And
with Fee, it was a play with Fee, like it wasn't flopping. Fee wasn't flopping, but she was guarding JJ in the post, and she got a little bit of contact. And obviously, Fee is a little bit smaller than her, and then she got knocked, to the ground, and they call offensive foul on JJ when she was asking, the bench to review the play.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's another thing. Obviously, it develops and favors your memory, right? The fact that you have to maybe remember some plays, the use and the art of breaking down film, right?
Yes.
That's and obviously, if you got maybe a great memory, it helps you a lot. It's a huge advantage.
And for me, I have on my computer, I have folders of clips. I literally have thousands of clips just saved and marked for certain players, certain schemes. And if I ever need to go back to something, whether I'm conversing with somebody or if I need it for a future video, it's always there. And I can look at, okay, what is a player this is a play that I recognize. They ran this, back in July on this day against a certain team, or this player likes to do this move, or this player is great at making reads to the opposite corner. Just tendencies and certain plays I always have just bookmarked and saved on my computer for whenever I'm working on a future video, or I'm watching games in the moment and something, pops up in my mind.
The recollection of the archive.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's amazing, man. Let me ask you this, because I was thinking when I was watching I think it was against the Sun, the Connecticut Sun, if I'm not mistaken. I was starting to pick up the fact that Minnesota, in particularly Fee, she was showing and asking for the ball and getting the ball in the middle of the paint. She gets the ball in the middle of the paint, but then she got a defender behind her. But one thing that I was saying is maybe is a little bit it's more difficult to get the ball in the middle of the paint when they are playing a 5-out system on Minnesota, and they can easily double. I mean, not easily, but the double team, you're not going to be able to pick up as quick the double team, right? As In contrast, if you are getting the ball, in the other side of the outside the paint, when you are on the left side of the floor, you're gonna initiate the post, and you can see obviously what's developing. If you are a great passer, can make that pass. But what do you make about that? Did you pick that also?
I
That
picked it up, and
they
I
were
think
getting a lot of touches there.
yeah, and I think that's why I really that's why I really wanted the Liberty and Lynx series to happen, because I felt like of the remaining teams in the semifinals, I felt like those were the two teams that probably had the most modern approach to offense. And they were two teams that they were the most modern, and I felt like they were the hardest to take away just because of how many three-point shooters they have. Like the Liberty having someone, Leonie Fibic, as a rookie that can
6'4". She looks like a giant from X-Men.
Exactly. She can play multiple positions. She can defend.
Damn, she was guarding like Alana Smith on some possessions.
She made a pass the other day. It was game 4 where the ball swung to her at like the top of the key, and I thought she was gonna swing it. The defense thought she was gonna swing it to the corner, to the left corner, and so the defense has started rotating to close out to the corner, and she swings it to the right corner. Like the ball had just come from the right corner, she swings it back to the right corner, fakes out the defense, and it was one of Jonquel's threes in the corner. That was why it was just. She is so ahead of her time as a rookie. Like, rarely do you.
She play overseas, right? Like a couple of years.
Germany, I believe,
and Spain as well. I don't know.
Yeah, and she is so like ahead of her time as a rookie. Like, rarely do rookies come in and are that pro ready, especially starting on a championship team.
That was crazy into the playoffs.
Exactly.
Vandersloot going to the bench, acting like a pro, like a vet. And wow, it's crazy, and I also like Betnijah Laney-Hamilton, the work that she has been done. Obviously, she has been dealing with an injury on her knee. And everybody can shoot on the Liberty. It's like you got Jonquel Jones, Stewie can shoot, Sabrina can shoot, Betnijah can shoot, Phoebe can shoot. It's crazy. And then you got to Minnesota, like almost everybody. I mean, everybody can shoot.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And then Minnesota, what makes Minnesota so interesting is Courtney Williams is the ultimate. She is the ultimate drop coverage. I call it the drop coverage killer, because there was a stretch where New York was like, okay, maybe we'll play Jonquel with some drop coverage, and she's just walking into mid-range pull-ups and just making them. And it's like, when you have somebody that can also do that in pick and roll, like, it makes you so tough to stop as an offense. Like, it's with Sabrina making the phenomenal leap she's made this year with her scoring, inside the arc. She's went from, a below average score inside the arc to like well above average in one season. And, that improvement is led to this being her best postseason of her career. So I think that's why this has been such a phenomenal series from a strategic standpoint, from a personnel standpoint. And it's a shame that tomorrow is the last game we get to see from these two. But
yeah, probably not probably. Obviously, it's the last game of the season. Yeah. We're not gonna. We don't know who's gonna win. And like you were saying, these two teams have the Liberty, they beat the Aces, and they overcame that, and the Lynx, they went and beat the Mercury. They beat the Connecticut Sun. Then now they're going against the Liberty. And I think it's going to be crazy. And I really like coming off the bench, Sabally. She's huge. She gets a lot of she gets rebounds. She plays with energy. And Kayla Thornton, she scored like, I think when they played for the Commissioner Cup, she scored like 5 threes.
Yeah,
something like that. It was crazy. How much attention do you pay to bench players? In this case, in the finals, they are great.
In the finals, it's been a huge difference maker, especially Nyara Sabally had a huge game 3. Kayla Thornton has given critical. Kayla Thornton throughout the entire postseason, especially with Betnijah Laney dealing with the knee injury, she's given some phenomenal minutes off the bench. And I think those two have been, even Courtney Vandersloot at times, I thought has been very good. In the Atlanta series, I thought she was great. she's having a much better postseason than she did last year. And I think that has ultimately been the difference for both teams. And that has actually dictated a lot about how these teams do in the postseason and in the finals. You look at Minnesota as well. The difference between Juhas and Myisha Hines-Allen from game 3 to 4 is night and day. Their ability to basically replicate similar offensive approaches with Juhas on the floor it was the difference between them being minus 19 with Hines-Allen on the floor, and I think they might have actually won Juhas's minutes last night with just the way she was able to impact she made some good defensive plays. She was also a great connector. Like, she just fills their 5-woman unit so well. And she's not a great shooter, but she's somebody that you at least have to respect out there, which when it comes to role players, that can be the biggest difference. So,
and sometimes she's even switching to Sabrina.
Yeah,
that's crazy. And we're gonna see maybe game 5. We're gonna see if Hines-Allen will play. But I also like Juhas. Dorka Juhas. So has been crazy, man. What more can we say? I don't want to take advantage of your time, man. We've been here for an hour, so I think it's going to be a great game. Hopefully we can collab in the future, man. I really appreciate you for being here, and I learned a lot, especially when you did the breakdown when it comes to the plus minus and everything in the sample size. Man, I appreciate you being here, man.
I appreciate you so much for having me. You've done a phenomenal job with your channel as well, and I absolutely hope we can collab in the future.
Definitely, man. So we're gonna have a great game tomorrow. Josh has the Liberty. I mean, you got the Minnesota Lynx. I got the Liberty. So we'll see what happens. So I appreciate you being here, man. So until next time, everybody, go out and check Josh Felton on YouTube. Great content creator. Obviously very, very detail oriented, as you witness it on this live stream. So I appreciate him for being here. Until next time, everybody, don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. This has been the MOP podcast. So until next time, take care, everybody, and we are out. Me and Josh, we blew that shit out of the park. It was a home run. So it was a great episode, man. I appreciate you, everybody, and until next time, take care. I appreciate you here, bro.
Thank you.